Yeah, I was the lady that says that. So before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that UBC is based on the University of British Columbia, and we're gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam First Nation people. If you'd like to learn more about the native land, please visit nativeland.ca. We will be sending the link in the chat box below. But anyway, we are really excited for you to be here today, possibly from all around the world. So give us some emojis to react to show your excitement. My name is Yen. I will be your co-host tonight along with Andy. And without further ado, here is our agenda for the night. We'll start out with some club introduction with Rachid and Rithik, and Andy will be doing some introduction to speakers. Thank you, Emma, Karen, and Charmaine for being here. We'll then go into 3 breakout room sessions so you can have an interactive session with the speakers. And the speakers will rotate between each room every 15 minutes. You just have to stay in where you are. The speakers will jump around the breakout rooms. And at 7:30, we will join back to the main room, do a little debrief, and Rachid will end us off for the night. So yeah, Rachid, take it away.
Hey everyone, thanks so much, Emma, Charmaine, and Karen for joining us. We're super excited to have you here. I just wanted to give a quick intro to our club for everyone who's new. So in case you missed our last event, our club's goal is to make a community, close-knit community for UBC students interested in product management. So our goal is to just help you learn and grow your PM-specific skills as a community. We offer this to 3 major pillars. One of them are speaker events where you can learn from other PMs in industry, just like this. The second one is workshops and interactive events to help you improve your PM skills. And finally, of course, we have a Slack community that helps you interact with other PM aspirants at UBC. And yeah, today we're gonna be having a nice interactive chat with some previous interns. So they've all worked at some great companies, and you can ask them whatever questions are on your mind, career related, PM related, or anything. And we hope that you will enjoy that interactive aspect a lot, because that's what we were going for with this event. So yeah, thank you all for joining, and I'll pass it off to Andy to kick things off. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, let's get to meet our speakers and get to know them a little bit. So I'll let our speakers introduce themselves, and as a part of their introduction, I'd also like them to tell us how they got into PM and their background at UBC, like what they study. We can start with Karen.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Karen. I'm currently entering my 6th year now, studying CMS, so a combined major in life science, computer science, and environmental sciences. I'm also doing a commerce minor, and I've just completed 16 months of co-op in the past 2 years, 8 months of which was at Samsung Electronics as a PM intern on their product strategy team. I initially went into PM because during my first internship as a QA engineer, I was actually recommended the role by the product management director. And I was really curious as to kind of how products were created and how they were built. So I took a BrainStation course outside of UBC, and I applied for a role in product management with Samsung. I'm also doing a product management role in January for SAP, for the SAP Analytics Cloud team. So if you guys have any questions as to how the interview process was for SAP as well, I can answer those questions.
Awesome. Let's move on to Charmaine.
Hey, I'm Charmaine, and I'm in my last semester here. So I study computer science and I minor in creative writing. As far as experience goes, currently a TA for CompSci 344, which is the HCI course. And then prior to that, I was a software engineering intern at SAP, Pinterest, Slack, and then I switched over to being a PM in the Microsoft Garage. And then I went back to Microsoft and was on the Azure Developer Relations team. I know that Emma's also done the Garage. I think our experiences would be really different because I actually interned way back. So I think it'd be interesting to hear about how the Garage has changed over time as well. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Yeah, so I actually fell into PMing backwards, but I'll get into that. Basically, my name is Emma, and I'm studying engineering physics here at UBC. I'm in my 5th year of 6, and I have 5 different work terms under my belt if you count the one that I'm currently completing. Only one of them has been in PM, and at the time, I thought that PM, when I applied, meant project management. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I can provide interview tips now, though I will say that they're not the ones that I followed when I prepared for the interviews my first time around. And like truly, if someone had told me, even in my first year of engineering, that a job existed that allowed you to focus on people and creative technological solutions to things, and like the implementation of the solution without having to actually be the one sitting behind a computer 8 hours a day, I don't think I'd have believed you. I love communicating with people. I love solving meaningful problems. A lot of my work turns to research and early stage prototyping consulting. And then it was Microsoft this past summer at the garage. I'm at a startup right now doing like a split PM software position. And next summer, I'm actually going back to Microsoft for a PM position as well. Yeah, Charmaine, our garage experiences are probably totally different because I completed mine from my basement, which allowed me to work with interns all over North America instead of just the people who were in Vancouver or who were destined to be in Vancouver if it was happening in person. But yeah, it was a really valuable experience. So any questions about what I would have done differently in that whole adventure, or just in general how I ended up here, given the fact that I had no idea what PM was in the first place. I've spent a lot of time because of that trying to figure out what it is, and I think maybe I could answer some more specific questions there too. But yeah, that's my introductory ramble.
Awesome. Thanks for introducing yourselves, speakers. And if we move on to the next slide, I'll now talk about how the breakout rooms will work. So how these will work is there are going to be 3 breakout rooms. I'm sure that if all of you are familiar with breakout rooms now that you've been in online Zoom classes, you'll be randomly assigned to one of 3 breakout rooms, and every 15 minutes, these speakers will rotate. So you won't need to do anything or change breakout rooms. You'll just need to sit tight, and the speakers will rotate, and you'll get a chance to ask all 3 speakers your questions. And we wanted this event to be as interactive as possible because we're all trying to grow a community here at UBC. So feel free to get to know each other, turn on your cameras, turn on your mics, and just ask questions away and learn about PM. So without further ado, I'll ask Courtney to pull the trigger, and everyone will be split into your breakout rooms.
Yeah, I'm just getting ready to launch you guys in. So the first cycle, like all the other cycles, are going to be 15 minutes, and I will send the speakers a warning to let them know when to cycle around. And like Andy said, participants can just sit tight and wait for the speaker to enter. All right, opening the rooms now.
All right, I think, yeah, I think we can get started. I guess to start off, could you tell us a bit more about like what got you interested in the PM space and why did you decide to pursue kind of like an internship in it?
Yeah, I realized I didn't talk about that even though I was supposed to during the intro. So yeah, I'll cover that. But basically, yeah, I think I was always really into software engineering. I've been coding since I was super duper young, and I always knew like I wanted to be a software engineer because I wanted to build awesome things. And then I remember doing my first software internship and realizing, oh, maybe it is different. Maybe when you're working in a big company, a lot of the decision making goes to someone else, and like now the decisions that you make are now like more technical implementation decisions rather than like actual product decisions that I was curious about when I was younger, at least. So I ended up trying it once at Microsoft, and I honestly like I was still very like unsure after that. I think I had a great experience. I still went back to software engineering after for 2 terms, and then I eventually went back to PMing. So I think at the end of the day, my ideal role would be something that's like a hybrid. But for the time being, I think being a technical PM is kind of where I see myself. Yeah.
Mm. Does anyone else have any other questions? I want to open up the floor. I'm sure many of you have had, similar thoughts / experiences in terms of software. Take it away.
Yeah, I have a question. So in terms of your prep leading up to all of that, like there's a lot of people go through like lead coding to try to get their software job and then like move into PM. Did you do something differently or was it mostly just the same?
Yeah, I think mostly for software, I was doing like pure lead code and then going to a bunch of hackathons, building out personal projects. And then I would say that's super applicable for when you decide to transition into a PM role as well, is like having those personal projects that you've built and being able to articulate why it was important to build them and think a little further than, oh, I just wanted to try how to use React and something like that. So yeah, I think there's that. And then also, I think yeah, cracking the coding interview, people always say that, but I would say if you've taken Comp Sci 221 or like even 320, I don't think there's a need to read that other than like kind of a refresher. And then there's also like cracking the PM interview, which is the cracking the coding and like equivalent in PM. And then you'll realize kind of there are different types of questions. So there's like your behavioral ones, you have your technical ones, and then you have your estimation questions, you have your product sense questions, or like system design, etc. So yeah, that's not that different in terms of prepping for SWE versus PM.
Thank you.
Speaking of cracking the PM interview, so is there anything that you think would be essential for us to know that wasn't covered in the book? Like any personal pro tip or like, oh, you should prepare for that kind of question that wasn't mentioned in the book? Would you have any recommendations?
That's a good question. Let me think. I would say know the type of company that you're interviewing for. Like I think they have like a very generic like framework. But then you have to kind of reformulate that framework into so that it doesn't sound as robotic. But there's also just like really weird questions that companies could ask. Like the other day I remember interviewing and someone asked me like, oh, like, yeah, what's your favorite product, and all these questions that I was expecting. And then someone asked, oh, what is a time when you did not meet deadlines and you try, like, I don't care how hard you tried, you just did not make it. And it was not a good scenario. How did you do that? Like, how did you deal with that? And it was so hard because I think I gloss over the behavioral questions as someone who like feels like, oh, like I know how to talk about what I've done. And I just like didn't even think about preparing behavioral questions in that way. Like I prepare like, oh, why I want to work there, like why I think I'm a good fit, but I didn't prepare that type of question. So I'd say spending some time of thinking about like specific scenarios that you can pull up when they ask really curveball questions like that force you to admit that you've done something wrong is an interesting one. Just that's like top of mind for me right now because I really stumbled on that one. What other things? Yeah, I feel like they cover a lot of it. What other questions have I encountered? Yeah, I don't know. I guess I've also seen ones that are like extremely specific to the company that if you know their company products really well, you would have a leg up. Oh, another like stranger question that I've encountered was I always prep for answering, oh, like these are the tech products that I really like. And then this is how I would improve these tech products. And then I remember one time an interviewer asked, what are some non-tech products that you like,
Okay.
and then how would you improve them? And I had a really hard time. Like suddenly I'm like, I can only think of tech products, and I was saying like really weird stuff like the bathroom like scraper, like the water scraper, and so, like super weird stuff. But yeah, like I feel like it's just prepping like for every scenario of them forcing you to go beyond like what they know you're going to prepare for, and then they just like curveball you. Those are two, I guess, that like really stood out. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I'll let you know if I have anything else. Yeah, like definitely failed a lot of interviews before, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. what's everyone's background, or what drives you to want to learn more about PMing?
Like
Hop in here because going on. Okay, well, yeah, I'll just hop in. Anyways, I just joined this because I'm a business and computer science student. And right now, I was about to start my first co-op term, like next term, doing in software engineering. And like I was talking to the guys, you're asking me why I want to be a software engineer. I was like, told them all about how I love coding, how I love solving problems in coding, right? But then the other part was like, I do also, part of me enjoys solving business problems as well, talking to people, gathering requirements, and figuring out like what's the best way to, like it's great if you solve a software problem, but to get someone to use it is a completely different issue in itself, right? So that's kind of like why I want to get into PM. And yeah, that's just an intro for myself. But actually, I also had a question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so just really quickly, I do want to know a bit more about like how you think your software engineering position helped you out at your current product management position. Like, how would you, if I were to try and apply for a job in that, how would I use my upcoming co-op experience and sell that as like this was something that will help me out in this job?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, I feel like there's always this misconception that if you're a PM, somehow you have to be non-technical, and I think that's not true. I think if your goal is to stay technical, then you can very much do that. And so that's kind of the path that I've always taken. And ways in which being able to code has helped me, or so I think like the first obvious one is the fact that you can communicate with engineers more easily. You understand what they're talking about, you speak their language, you understand what's feasible, what's not. um, and so that kind of helps you bridge between, okay, design shows me this and I actually don't think that's feasible, so you can already push back right away, type of thing. So you kind of serve as the bridge between the two, and like really being able to speak to that, I think is, and like having empathy in terms of that is really important. So I think that's the first thing. They always talk about that. I can talk about like examples. So when I was in the garage, I like helped prototype one of the products, and then I just like coded it up with like JavaScript, our cognitive services API that was like in beta at the time, and like simple HTML, CSS, super easy. And we basically used that to do initial user testing. And so that was really nice because kind of had an idea, wasn't sure if it was going to work, and I was able to build it myself and then really quickly test it. So that's something that like, hey, if you don't have the background, then you would just have to rely on someone else to do it. So there's that. And then in this past summer, I worked on improving site search. And so, yeah, like basically we were getting a lot of zero result searches. What do we do to tackle that? And so a lot of that required like actually data analysis and grabbing all of our telemetry and making sense of it. And so, being able to like understand how I could pull all of this data from, like, we use Kusto, and then they have like Kusto query language, which kind of looks like SQL, but so like I could use like Kusto to pull all the data myself. I could do really quick analysis of all of it first, and then I was able to also like run my own Python scripts on it to test. Like, I was thinking, oh, maybe we need to run spell check on all of these results, and so I was able to actually just take all of our past telemetry, throw it into the Bing spell check API, and then see what it spat out, and then immediately know if that was even a solution that could work. And so now that I had that set up, testing everything else was so easy. So I could now try like, oh, what if we added some regex? What if like, etc. So I think that really helped in terms of like, oh, being able to be scrappy, and like if you're not sure if an idea would work, you get to test it out right away and you're not bothering anyone. And then the outcome of that is now I'm able to quantify the impact that I think I could have. So I just went to tell my manager, I'm like, I think we can cut our zero result searches by 60% just by doing two things. And I know it's going to work because I did it. And so that's like, oh, okay, then there's no reason to say no, because there's no chance of failure unless you were working on some like crazy anomaly data, outliers, stuff like that. But other than that, right, it was pretty foolproof. So stuff like that, like it's always like there's always ways to bring in what you know. You just have to find a way to like reel it in. So I think that being a strong software engineer makes you a good PM. Being a good PM makes you a stronger software engineer. And so if you're kind of thinking about trying it, I would say just try it, because I think it adds to the experience. In fact, I would argue it adds more to the experience than I've done a lot of like software engineering internships prior to that. And I almost feel like my skill set was plateauing until I tried PMing. And then I understood the other side of our work. And then I felt like I came back and became a stronger software engineer in that sense. So yeah, I think that's being technical is like, there's always something you can bring to the table. And that's the fun part of why like PM is so cross-functional, I think. Yeah. Does that answer that?
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's kind of like what I imagined it to be, right? Like I am like a bit of a hands-on person, so I really like what you're saying. But yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. The only caveat that I will put is my mentor my mentor and I are both like really, really technical, at least this past summer. And so one thing he said is we do have to be careful though. We cannot start doing the engineer's work, or else they would feel like we're kind of like stepping on their tail. So I think that's another thing to watch out for. But for the most part, if you're sure that like you're gonna take off the load of work for them rather than like adding it on, I think it's like, yeah, it's like a good thing. And it's nice to be able to be scrappy about it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah.
No problem. Any other questions, or even just like you want to share your journey so far and like where in the pipeline you're at in terms of PMing?
I can share and then ask a question based on that. So the path that I'm sort of taking to try to get into PM is more in like data analytics. And I think you mentioned there was a little bit of that in your role too. So from your experience, is that, because I know most of the people that I talk to, they go from a software background into PM, or they just go straight from a business background. But do you think going from an analytics or like a data analyst background is still as valuable, or do you think there's some things that I want to focus on a little bit more when I start prepping for a PM interview?
Yeah, I think it's different. Like if you're coming from a software engineering experience, you have the experience of building things. And so then you know what it takes to build a project or whatever. And then if you're coming from a data background, I see decisions being made in a PM role in two ways. So the first one being you do user research and you see if something works. So like what I said before, I have a prototype, I can test it on users, they tell me if it works, and then we iterate, right? And then the other path of that is the data approach, which is like, oh, I have all this data, I can test what it's gonna do if I do like run this on it, and then now I have this output and I can quantify the impact I'm going to make. So that's like the two ways that you can use to make product decisions. And so if you're really strong in one, I think then you could just like pick up the user research stuff. And then like now you have like really good background in terms of how you can approach making product decisions. I definitely think going from a data background is actually really strong, because I think it also depends on the team, but I found that there are some teams that are very, very data heavy. Like it's almost like they don't believe in user research that much. But because data is tied to numbers, they have a way easier time visualizing the type of impact that you're going to make. And so, yeah, I think like going from a data perspective is really good. And it was actually the reason that I spent so much time on it this summer was because I realized I was coming from a stronger like building project background, but I didn't actually know what to do with large amounts of data and how to actually analyze it. Like besides opening an Excel sheet and like trying to look line by line. So yeah, I think it's definitely helpful, and I can't imagine that not giving you a massive leg up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. I think we're switching rooms soon. I'm just gonna loop through the rooms real quick and double check. So hang tight. And I guess in the meanwhile, if there's any like last lingering questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah, and if y'all want to stay in touch, like feel free to add me on like Facebook, LinkedIn, or anything like that. Happy to chat anytime. And yeah, I think like, yeah, the journey is tough. So if you need just someone to listen to you, happy to do it.
Well, thank you. I'm just gonna add you right now.
Yeah, I can maybe I can like link it too.
I'm gonna sit here quietly. And I'm curious about this link that you're gonna send.
Oh, just my LinkedIn.
Oh,
Nothing
nice.
else.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I didn't do that with the last group. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna pull it up.
Just you can just like type it in chat. Does everyone see it or is it just here? I don't know. But yeah, feel free to add me LinkedIn or Facebook. Yeah. Do we swap rooms now? Or are we waiting for Andy to come back?
Oh, I got the message that said to swap.
Go ahead and shift over to the next room. But thank you so much, Charmaine.
Thank you.
All right. And welcome, Emma. Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. So I guess just a question to get everyone started. Do you kind of want to talk a little bit more about what made you like interested in PM in particular, or like what made you want to apply to PM positions? I know you mentioned that you were planning on.
I was very misguided at the beginning.
Yeah.
But not like misguided, but in a lucky way, I guess, in the sense that when I worked at an early stage prototyping consultancy in Vancouver called Misty West, I had a wonderful project manager named Chris. And Chris just, he worked as the customer advocate, and he was fantastic with project scope. And I think the things that I admired in him, though I didn't really know at the time, were qualities of a really good PM. And it was when he left that company to become a PM at Microsoft and then told me that I should give it a shot that I decided that, that he's so incredible at these skill sets. If I get a chance to work at Microsoft with him and to gain any of those skills, then that would be a fantastic experience. And little did I know that PMing is so much more than project management. It can be at times, but like I think that once I realized what it was, and this was like after the interview, full disclosure, I had to interview again for my Microsoft position next summer because of the online format. So if you do have any questions about the interview process, I can answer that a little bit better now. But yeah, at the end of the day, for me, through all of my work experience, it's always come down to people. I think that I like engineering so much because it's a great toolbox to go and implement things that make people's lives better. And the thing that pure engineering was missing for me and always has is that human element. That, a really successful engineer could sit at a desk 8 hours a day, deliver some beautiful software or maybe a drawing for something and go home, and that can be it. Whereas a PM spends a lot of the day on their feet, walking around, talking to people inside the company, outside the company, being creative, developing scopes and specs, talking to developers, talking to completely non-technical people, and sort of jumping around through all of those areas. I think that, at least in my experience, brought me a lot more energy than just sitting and doing technical work did. And so that was about when I figured out that I was doing something right in that space. I really like people, and my days get really boring without them. And so I think that's a big reason why I chose to pursue more PM related endeavors.
That was awesome. Thanks for answering. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask Emma?
I have a quick question. Emma, you mentioned that Chris, acted as a mentor. Could you talk a bit more about the role of mentor in your career so far?
Yeah, totally. I owe my entire career so far to mentors, honestly. Every job that I've secured so far has come through a contact or a mentor. I don't really use, or I haven't really used job boards. Like I had to go through the regular Microsoft process, but even then I had a referral from Chris. I think the best way that I've been able to leverage mentors is by understanding what it is they love about what they do and what it is that they don't. And when you ask those questions and you're able to, take their learnings from, long, hard-won careers, it can prevent you from making the same mistakes, and it can teach you a lot about what's out there in the industry. Like Chris loves his job because he's working with people all the time and solving problems and generating stoke around stuff. And I love generating stoke around stuff, and I didn't even know that was part of the job. And on the flip side of that, I've spoken to like design engineer friends. I thought, I've got a background in art. Maybe I want to be more of like a product design engineer or something more in the artistic or creative space that way. I asked them what the least favorite part of their job is. And they're like, well, I'm at my desk alone most of the day. And I was like, okay, absolutely not for me then. Like that, sort of take certain things off the table. Mentors are a really good way of gathering experience without actually having to go through getting the experience yourself. And also just having people to lean on, having people that vouch for you. Like, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have the referral when I applied to Microsoft. I'm at a startup right now that I wouldn't have ever interviewed for if I didn't have a mentor who knew the CEO and who, when I said, oh no, my exchange has been canceled, I need a co-op term instead, told me, oh, I can introduce you to my CEO friend. She's looking for a co-op term in the fall and she hasn't made a posting yet. I think so mentors for the networks they provide, for the faith they have in you. Like I've gone through, example, second year, I failed a midterm. I was like, I'm going to be a shit engineer, pardon the French. So I was like, this is it for me. Like, no way, I guess it's not for me. I'm going to drop out. I'm going to go into kinesiology because for some reason I thought it'd be easier. I don't think it is in hindsight. But like, it was a mentor that said, actually, these are the special skills that you bring to the table. I think you have a really bright future in engineering and you should keep at it. So mentors is people to give you confidence, to refer you to things, to open your mind up to new ideas and to share their experience. I think those have all played really important roles in my career so far. So yeah, as many as possible and as organically as you can. Like it's really simple to just start a conversation with somebody, and it's, you're not going to get a win every time, but sometimes you'll really click and you'll choose to stay in touch, and those are the connections you should hold on to.
Yeah, thanks so much for your insights.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah, for sure.
Like as a PM, would you think you're more like technical or less technical?
That's a good question. In general or in my personal sort of style?
Like what would you prefer? Do you prefer to like leverage as much data as you could or as you can, or do you prefer being using less data?
I would argue that the most successful PMs have a healthy dose of each. It's, it's so valuable to have numbers to back up your assumptions, and those numbers are essential when you're making the case for certain products to get funded. That said, if your job as a PM, if part of that job is to convince people that your product is worth it, to convince internal CVPs that they need to shell millions of dollars into this project, they need to hire devs for you, they need to reallocate all of these resources to solve this problem. Numbers go pretty far, but also we're all human at the end of the day. So if you're capable of making an emotional appeal for a product because you've spoken to someone who struggles with something that your product would fix, then that brings a whole new element. And I think it's probably what makes the difference. This is speculation here. It's probably what makes the difference between a good PM and a great PM. A good PM uses numbers, uses data, comes up with a number of assumptions based on that, hypothesizes how the product could change it, rolls the product out, figures out whether the hypothesis was met, and moves on. And I think a great PM leverages the power of narrative and of client involvement or customer involvement and combines that with the numbers to tell a much more compelling story. And I think that doesn't just motivate you, but it can motivate the CVPs to give you more money in Microsoft's case. It can motivate the team that you're working with, so the developers, all the technical people. So I think dancing around between those spaces is what a good PM would do best. And I would argue that you would be hard pressed to be successful using just one method or the other. Yeah, personally, I like a healthy mix of both.
You mentioned something interesting about stories and about driving a narrative to actually help someone out. Would you say that storytelling, like effective communication, is one of the is a PM's strongest qualities, or one of a PM's strongest qualities?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that like if you can't put yourselves in the position of your customer, if you can't advocate for them like you would advocate for yourself, if you can't fully understand, the story arc that could be your product, person A is struggling with this beautiful product comes into the mix and it solves all of their problems, and this is what that end state looks like. A good PM works as a North Star for their team to display or sort of, I guess, foreshadow what that end state could be. And that's a great sort of driving motivator for the team. And it's also a really good way to stay on task. It's a great way to, act against scope creep. Having a strong North Star that is sort of this vision of customer success is what can keep your team together. And it's what can convince people to believe in your product enough to support it internally and externally as well. So yeah, good narrative generation, good storytelling skills, like obviously something that we could all just continue working on forever. But it's one of the strongest tools in a PM's toolkit.
And do you have any, I don't know, go-to stories or like things that you can just like you know by heart how the story goes and everything, and so you can just pitch them to people just so they understand your message? Do you have any of those
stories that you can spout? That's a good question. I do
like
for the product
stories.
I worked on at Microsoft over the summer, but I'm not allowed to talk about it yet. So that's something. I think there is a pretty decent formula to it, but you don't want it to sound formulaic. And so you've got to find that balance. And the pitch is going to change also depending on who you're talking to. And so I know that the whole, audience purpose, context, etc., but you really can't miss any of those things. If your context is wrong, you're screwed. If the audience is wrong, you're screwed. If your purpose is off, then nobody's going to believe in you at all. So careful selection of those three factors: who you're talking to, what your goal is through the pitch, and then the context within which you're delivering the pitch are essential to getting it right. It's something that I would love to say I can do reflexively, depending on what mode I'm in, or maybe how much coffee I've had that day. That might change. But I think being genuine is the other thing that's important when you're telling a story. You can screw up, you can stumble, but if you're coming from a good place, people can tell. And if I was pitching you a product that I didn't believe in, you would know that I was, full of it, and you wouldn't believe in it quite as much. So bringing it back to people, bringing it back to, why it is that you believe in X, Y, or Z. And sometimes, honestly, that comes down to convincing yourself why it is you should care about something. You might end up on a product team that, the project I worked on at Microsoft this summer, not all that flashy. It's a small feature. I think I can say it was within Microsoft Teams. It's not out there in the world yet. And I really needed to dig deep to figure out why it was I cared about what it was I was working on. And I was able to generate a use case that really compelled me. Person A struggles with this, and this feature specifically helps them, tackle the workday with more dignity, helps them do these sorts of things. And as soon as I had that narrative, this product is going out to millions of people if it's through Microsoft Teams. That person probably exists. And you can use that as a compelling narrative for yourself. You can use it as a narrative for the team, and you can use it as a way to fully get in the feet of people who are going to benefit from your product. And I think that's key. If you don't believe in it, no one will. And then just sounds really cheesy, speak from the heart. I don't know, just like get it out there in a way that they'll convince.
You got to be genuine. Yeah.
You got to be genuine. It's so important. Yeah, it's really easy to dislike someone who's trying to sell you something that they wouldn't buy themselves. And so avoiding that at all costs, I think, is really important.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question.
All right, I think we have time for one more question if anyone has anything they wanted to ask Emma.
What advice would you give someone for like a project management interview?
That's a good question. Go in with a favorite product in mind. That's like the thing that a lot of PM interviews are going to default to is like, tell me about your favorite product. Why is it your favorite product? And so having one of those in your back pocket and having some meaningful reasons behind it are really important. Bringing back your focus and your values to people. A PM is a customer champion. They also normally have a technical background, a bunch of other stuff going for them, but at the end of the day, if you don't care about people, you're being hired to care about the people that you're designing stuff for. And so really, you know, coming in prepared with examples of times that you've helped people or that you've really cared about what, you know, the outcome was for somebody who's invested in a product you were working on. And then yeah, having like genuine reasons for why you love products, just like a product that is your favorite, and then also because sometimes they twist it that way, your favorite product of the company that you're applying to. Another fun thing to do there is to also come up with reasons why you don't like a product. Like if I was interviewing for Microsoft Teams, I'd be like, honestly, I think your feature set's there, it is laggy as heck, and everyone I know is really annoyed at Teams because it's super laggy, and you know, digital fatigue comes from a lot of different places. And if this is something you're trying to tackle, you know, stop tackling it by coming up with all these new features, chill on the features, make it work faster. People are getting exhausted. And so coming up with pros and cons of existing company products, how you would change them to be more people-centric or client-centric or customer-centric is a really good way to get started. You can weave those stories into other questions that they ask as well. And I think that's something that worked well on my second Microsoft interview when I actually knew what I was doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I'm gonna do what Charmaine did and drop my LinkedIn in the chat in case you guys have any other questions, and then I'll jump over to the other room. But thank you for the questions. Also, I think my phone's using the light browser, so apologies in advance. Talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Emma.
I think we're waiting for a speaker, right? I will grab Karen.
Hi. Sorry, I had some difficulty jumping into the breakout rooms, but I think I'm in the right room now.
Yes, you are. Hello, welcome, Karen. Hope it's going well for you so far.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Awesome, good to hear. So yeah, I guess we've just been starting most of our breakout rooms with a general question, which is kind of what made you want to apply to a PM role? I know that you come from not like a typical comp sci kind of background where a lot of PMs are, but you come from a bit of a less traditional background. So if you'd like to share with us a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, so I actually come from a CMS background, so I'm combining computer science with my degree, but I'm not essentially a computer science major. And so when I first initially decided I wanted to go into tech, I was a QA engineer at a company called Thrive Health. So it's a startup. Now it's kind of erupted from that, and they've actually signed a contract to create Canada's national COVID-19 app, which is really cool. So check out Thrive Health if any of you are looking for internships, because I think it's a really great place to start. But personally for me, I actually had the opportunity to work really closely with a lot of different teams when I was there. And the product management director reached out to me specifically because she found that I contributed a lot to the weekly sprint planning meetings. So she wondered if I was interested in pursuing a product management role in any way. And so I actually took a course during that time to kind of learn more about what product management was. So I took a BrainStation course, and my instructors there were really great, and they kind of just went over what product management was and what kind of the job entailed and how you would be successful in landing a role in a job like this. And I decided that it was something that I was interested in pursuing, which is why I applied to a role at Samsung and managed to land a role. So that's how I initially got into PM.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Karen. So does anyone have any questions that they like to ask?
I have a quick question. Since you mentioned your non-traditional background, do you see any advantages over maybe like PMs just coming from software engineer background where you're able to draw on your like very different experiences in your role?
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely think it's not essential to have a technical background going into a PM role, but I do find that it helps a lot. But it's really dependent on what product you're working on and what team you're working with, because I don't know if I shared this with you guys yet, but my first half of my Samsung internship was more of a business operations strategy type role, whereas my second latter half of my Samsung experience was more technical. And that was because I was working on two completely different projects. And so I really say that having that technical background is good, but it's not essential. And it really depends on what product you want to work on. But I found that coming from a CMS background made me more of a generalist in nature. And so instead of having specific coding skills, I draw from a variety of different experiences. And I have worked within different roles as well. So I've worked in marketing, I've worked in design, I've worked in QA and software. So I think that was really important when it came to product management, because I was able to kind of draw from each of those positions and figure out what each department had difficulties in and what their typical day-to-day challenges are. And that's really important for a product manager to know, because you're essentially kind of guiding these people through creating a product, and understanding kind of the difficulties and the challenges they face is really, really key to being a good product manager, as well as gaining respect from these other departments too. Yeah.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question, maybe what are some of the ways to gain the respect from the department?
Yeah, for sure. So this is something I actually like talking about, because it was a struggle for me at the very beginning of my internship at Samsung. I found that a lot of times I would ask something from a department and they wouldn't get back to me. And if my boss asked, then they get back to me right away, you know? And so something I found that helped mitigate that issue was, near the beginning of your internship, go and talk to as many people as you can. I set up some chats with all the leads of the departments that I knew I would have to work with eventually. So this included data, design, as well as people in different teams, and just talking to them and having that point of connection is super important. So I set up some coffee chats with these people, and I kind of introduced myself, figured out what their roles were, what they liked about Samsung. And I think that really created that point of connection where I was able to connect with these people. And eventually, if I were to ask for anything within the company, and these people were always willing to provide and always willing to kind of communicate with me. So I found that really helped mitigate that issue and that gap between really being able to delegate tasks to other departments. And especially as an intern, a lot of times I found that it was kind of difficult to have people kind of respect you as a product manager. And that's why there aren't that many product management internships out there, I feel. But it really does just take a little bit of effort from you on your end to kind of connect with these people prior to be working with them, so that they know that you respect their wishes, and as well as having that background also really helps.
Yeah, your advice about connecting with people before the start of your internship, I think sounds really useful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no problem.
With regards to that bit about delegating tasks, do you have any advice for that? Because I know that when you do so, you know, there's you don't want to sound too arrogant, but at the same time you want to make it sound important. Like, how does that dynamic kind of play out with your experience?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, again, it's really difficult for an intern to kind of delegate tasks, because a lot of the engineers and designers I found don't really want to listen to an intern. And yeah, I found that very difficult at first, but I think as long as you show that you're very passionate in your product and you kind of have a say in where your product is going, and you incorporate yourself into these type of conversations, eventually people will trust in what you say. And I found that that was really important for me because initially I was a little bit more shy, obviously being the new person in the product management team, and the only intern actually at the Samsung product strategy team. I found that it was really daunting for me to really speak up. But the more I spoke up and the more I suggested new features and new implementations, the more these other people kind of, I guess, trusted me. And so delegating these tasks got a little bit easier. So initially, my boss would have to help and kind of push these people to kind of complete what I'm asking for. But then eventually, I gained a respect from my colleagues, and it got a lot easier throughout time, I guess I could say. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. So so some PMs like take a more data-driven route. So they'll have an idea and they'll use data to back it up and then propose it to the engineers, to the designers. Other people have great storytelling abilities, so they'll persuade the engineers with their stories. What do you think you've used to like get people to do work besides like asking for it, but like how do you make sure that people like actually believe in what you want for the product and actually complete it or build it?
Yeah, for sure. So I think you make a really great point there. Personally, for me, I think initially my first 4 months of my internship was very data driven. I was working on an analytics tool. So I would say, obviously, in that sense, having the analytics to back up my arguments and being able to kind of showcase exactly why I want a specific feature to be made, that was, I guess, more data driven, you can say, my first 4 months working on that product. But for my next 4 months working on the new product, there was no data to back it up because it hasn't been launched yet. And so basically, I found that it was really important for me to kind of have a very good idea of what I wanted to implement, have a very good vision of it, and be able to set that up in my presentations where people were able to easily visualize it. That I found was super important for my latter half of my Samsung internship because it was a brand new product. We didn't have data to kind of drive people to kind of understand and I guess incorporate themselves into kind of the strategies and the decisions I was making. So yeah, definitely I take pointers from both different aspects. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Yeah, I think I get an idea. I have an idea. Thank you.
Perfect.
Well, I think we have time for one more question if anyone has anything to ask Karen. Okay, if not, I guess I'll ask one. So Karen, I know you have an internship at, was it SAP coming up this year? Yeah, so I guess like since it'd be your second kind of PM internship, how does like going into that position kind of differ from the first time going into a PM position at Samsung? Like, is there anything particular you want to do and you want to learn about, or I guess like how does your perspective different than the first time around?
Yeah, for sure. So going into this new role, I know it's at an entirely different company, but also the product that I'll be working on is very different. I mean, in Samsung, I got an opportunity to work on both an existing product and a new product, but in SAP, I believe the role that I would be entering is more solutions based. So I would have clients that would come up to me and ask for suggestions on how to problem solve and different solutions that SAP provides. And I believe that a big part of my role is gathering those market requirements and being able to essentially provide them with as much insight as I do in the product, rather than driving a product forward. So they're essentially two very different roles. But I mean, having that background as a product manager previously really did help, because it helped me kind of understand the structure and how a typical PM thinks. So you have to be very willing to take initiative in kind of different projects and the implementations. And I think Samsung really taught me that, in not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to be curious about the product. And I know that that would be really important, bringing that experience over to SAP. But like I said, being a PM for different products the role changes very significantly. So I'm not sure exactly what I would be doing at SAP, but it would be very different than my role at Samsung. But at the same time, there are certain aspects in terms of leadership and in terms of taking initiative and being curious that will stay similar throughout both internships.
All right, perfect. Thanks for answering the question, Karen. And looks like this comes to the end of our breakout room, but thank you again for everyone that came and listened and asked questions. And we'll see you all in the main room for wrapping up. All right, thanks everyone.
Perfect. Global time zones. Sorry, time zones were really different. And so a lot of our meetings will be after work hours, and I would have to participate in them. And so that was a very interesting thing for me to experience, as well as the meetings with HQs, because they're in Korea. That was always in odd times. But my latter half of my internship, I was actually working on a new product. So I got to kind of get my hands into defining a product vision and kind of figuring out how we were going to partner up with big companies like IBM or Ford or Siemens and incorporate our product with theirs, which I can't really talk about because it hasn't been launched yet. But it did involve me creating some sequence diagrams and having a little bit of a technical background to understand machine learning models. And I don't think I can elaborate on that, but it was a really interesting experience, both the first 4 months and the latter 4 months. If you guys want me to talk more about it, I could. But
yeah, that sounds
good. I think we have one question from.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, let me check the chat.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Hey, yeah, my question was about actually your commerce minor you mentioned. I think how valuable was that? And did you find that, like, was this something you ended up doing after doing that first internship as a QA? How did it come about, and how valuable was it towards being a product manager?
Yeah, I'd actually say it was pretty valuable. I actually did the commerce minor prior to my internship. So my internship started this January, and I've completed all of my commerce courses before that. And I found that it was actually very valuable because I did have to do some market research, which was a commerce course that I had to take. I also I took one of the courses you could decide to take as part of your commerce minor was the, I think it was called business strategy. It's COM 495 to be specific, but I found that super useful because I actually got to apply a lot of the concepts that I learned in class. I learned about kind of how businesses strategize and what the competitors are, and kind of who got a competitive advantage over other companies and how to kind of define that. And so when I was working at Samsung, a big part of my first half of my internship, I actually got to communicate a lot with other companies, as well as participate in a lot of strategy meetings, and I feel like I was able to kind of apply what I learned in that class specifically to all of my daily tasks that I was doing there. So I would say, yeah, to sum it up, it was pretty useful, and I would recommend the commerce minor to anyone pursuing a PM role to kind of support and accommodate the business aspect of the role.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful.
I would just want to add a little bit to that actually. So I would say if you have the opportunity to take like entrepreneurship classes, I know for engineering there's one that adds a lot of value as well, because a lot of PM is quite similar to like starting a company, starting a startup, because you're basically building a product from scratch, right? So all that experience is super valuable in my experience as well. Just wanted to add that. But yeah, completely echo Karen's points on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have Joseph next. Feel free to ask.
Yeah, hi. I guess, sorry. Okay, I guess you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier with the combiner question, but it's kind of like a two-part question. So one, it seems like you have like a lot of experience with other roles, and like you've talked to a lot of people within different roles. So how did you narrow down on PM? And then the second part of this question would be like, based on your experiences now, what would the role of PM, who would it not be good for, based on your experience?
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Joseph. But yeah, so why PM initially for me was actually because I worked my first internship as a QA engineer at a company called Thrive Health. So it's a health tech startup. Now it's kind of evolved into something new because they now create the national COVID-19 application. But it was super interesting to work for them when they were still a small startup. And I actually got an opportunity to work with many different teams. And I think that's what's really important about a startup culture. I think it was really valuable for me to start off working at a startup because I was able to kind of be able to integrate myself within every single team. So I talked a lot with the engineers. I sat down with the product managers. I sat down with the designers. And I wanted to learn more about tech because I wanted to know kind of where I lie and where my passions were. And I wasn't exactly sure if engineering was that for me. My initial sight at the beginning of my career was set on software engineering. And then after my first internship, I realized I didn't love to code as much as I thought I would. And I talked to the product management director that was working with me. I've also spoken to the engineering lead, and they suggested product management as something I could go towards because I did have that technical background. But at the same time, I really did enjoy kind of being able to inject myself into these conversations as to where the product was leading and what the future of the product was, and being able to make suggestions on features that I wasn't able to do kind of as an engineer. And I wouldn't say that as an engineer, you can't kind of decide on the future of the product or anything, because you definitely can give your input, but it's just traditionally the role as a PM is more revolved around figuring out new features. It's more exciting for me personally. So that's why I decided I should probably try it out. And after taking some courses around it, and after my PM experience at Samsung, I realized it's definitely something I'd rather do over coding or being an engineer. But I mean, everyone has their own preferences, and I guess it's good to kind of try everything out. Yeah, and what was the second part of your question? Sorry.
So like, who would PM not work out for?
I feel like, okay, for who will PM work out for, it would definitely be for people who love communicating with other teams. You're constantly in meetings. So I find that a big portion of your day is in a meeting, communicating with people, whether that be with engineering teams and design teams internally within your company, or whether that be with other stakeholders and people outside of your company and with customers. And so I definitely say for people who like the social aspect of working in an environment, definitely PM might be a good place to start. And I'd say maybe if you don't really like speaking up that much, or if you rather kind of have your day-to-day tasks being given to you and you get to kind of decide how you want to implement that, or it's more of an individualized role, then I wouldn't suggest PM, just because based on my experiences, it is more collaborative and you really need to be able to communicate well with the other members of the other departments in your company.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I would also say that if you are really like passionate about thinking about like the directions of a product, or like just thinking about stuff from users' perspective, because in my experience also as an engineer, you're really focused on the how. If you want to focus on the why behind things, PM should be for you. And yeah, ambiguity, you would thrive in ambiguity because I'm sure there's a lot of like ambiguous decision making that you need to do. So those are kind of my thoughts on that as well. I just wanted to add. Cool. We have Tricia next. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi there. My question is, for your PM role, did you find it, like when you were taking on this PM role, did you find it daunting? And like, how did you prepare for it beforehand? And I guess you can maybe also touch a bit on how you prepared for like interviews as well, but you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be just interviews. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So to be honest, it was pretty daunting to me at first, just because I didn't really know too much about the role yet. And I think that's what's great about having UBCPMC being a new club here. You guys can all learn about the role before kind of jumping into it. But for me, I kind of just decided, PM, I'm kind of interested in this role. Let's just jump into it. And in terms of preparing for the interview, of course, I mean, I have this book actually right in hand, Cracking a PM Interview. It's a staple. But aside from reading these books, I think it's really important to be able to watch some videos on YouTube just to get a sense of how people typically answer PM questions, because they do range from some of them are technical, some of them are more product design related. I know I've gotten tons of product design questions in my interviews. There's also execution type questions, or what's your favorite product? And they just kind of want to get a sense at how creative you are and whether you kind of have that same mindset that a PM needs. And yeah, so I found that preparing for interviews, definitely do your research. There are a lot of resources out there that you can find just by Googling, but also read some books, watch some videos. They definitely help. And so going back to your first point about like whether I found PM daunting, to begin with, I think I really do suffer from imposter syndrome, because I don't come from like a traditional comp sci background. So I feel like at the beginning, I thought maybe I didn't have the same experiences these other people had, and I didn't think that my competitors would kind of be able to, or I didn't think that I would be able to compete against other people with actual CS majors. But going into it, you have to make sure to keep an open mind and to be very, very curious about what you're working on. I think initially when I started out, I was very, very curious, and I messaged all of the leads for the different teams that I would be working with. So whether that be data or design or other teams within the company, I would message their leads and I would have a coffee chat with them just to kind of get a sense at what they do and like how passionate they are about the company and what they like about Samsung and what they suggest me to do. So as an intern going into a big company like this, they obviously don't expect you to know everything. And I found that it was really useful for me to have these people to go towards, just because I introduced myself at the beginning and I've spoken to them before. So those are some advice I would give entering a PM role to make it less daunting, is to definitely kind of interact with the different teams you'll be talking to, and really just be curious about everything, because you're there to learn and they don't expect you to know everything at the very beginning.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, we have another question from Kervin. Great thoughts on that, Karen. Echo everything.
Hi, Karen. You kind of talked about it a little bit before, but could you go over the interview process when you applied to Samsung, and also maybe give us a few resume tips?
Yeah, for sure. So my interview process at Samsung was actually pretty smooth, and it was mostly behavioral based. It was only one interview, and it was 1 hour with 2 of the members of the team that I was going to be working very closely with. And primarily at the time, they just wanted to know that I had a tech background and that my personality would fit very well with the team. And so it was mostly behavioral based, but they did ask me some product questions like, what's your favorite product? And they just kind of wanted me to go through kind of why. And just like Rachid said, they always ask you why. So as a PM intern, you're going to be asked that question a lot of times. And so they want to know whether you can think deeply into that. And in terms of resume tips, I'd say really do highlight your ability to kind of be diverse. So as long as you diversify your skills and you share the fact that you are actually able to kind of communicate to different teams and understand their challenges and struggles, I'd say that's very important on a PM resume, because that's kind of the advice I got from my PM supervisors. They would say to really highlight your diverse range of skills, because you never know what kind of problems you'll come into as a PM and what kind of solutions you'll be coming up with. So definitely diversify your skills and kind of highlight any technical experience you have. That would be really great. But if you don't have technical experience, I mean, it's still totally fine. Yeah, that's my advice on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I think, have we made the switch yet for speakers?
Not yet.
So we're going to do
will
the switch
jump
right
over.
now.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I going over to room 1 now?
I think it's 2, because you are 1, right? Are
We're
you
in 2 right
Oh,
now.
we're in
though.
2,
It looks
yeah.
like,
So
yeah, I'm in 2.
3.
It's all
Yeah,
good.
so increment. Yeah, so you're
3.
going to 3.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Okay. You should be joined by, let's see, Charmaine, I think.
Yes. Or Emma. Not too
Oh,
sure.
are we in room 2? Okay, cool.
Yes.
No, yeah, Emma should be up with us. All right.
I think you guys are still missing a speaker. I'll try to
Yeah.
find that.
So
How did you guys find that first conversation? Helpful?
I thought it was good. Yeah. No, I know Karen personally, so it's just kind of funny to pop in. But that was just like a question I always wanted to ask her, and I got a good answer from it. So
Okay, that's
was good.
awesome. Yeah. Cool.
yes.
And yeah, Charmaine's here. Hello.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to our little
Yeah.
session. Hope you enjoyed the previous one.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Okay, great. Questions, anyone?
Yeah, I had a question. I wanted to ask, in a and normally a PM internship, you're normally working for about like 4 months, right? And I was wondering how much of an impact can you actually make on a product in just 4 months? Just the time you have.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think it depends on what your team is willing to give you and like how familiar you are with the space and how much time you would spend onboarding and learning things. So I can tell you what I've been able to like ship as far as like products go or projects go in my past experiences, and I think they really vary. So when I was initially in the garage, I worked on 4 projects and I was the only PM, and they don't do that anymore, which makes sense because I worked so much. But we shipped 4 projects. So we did 2 research projects with Microsoft Research. So we did one that was like inserting artificial intelligence into the snipping tool. And it looks a lot like, I think the app is called Sketch now, that ships with Windows. And then we also worked on this mobile chest x-ray analysis app where you could take pictures of your chest x-rays, and then we could tell you, it's kind of a decision assistant in terms of like what we think is happening in the x-ray image. And then I also worked on a project with BC Cancer where we did and the mixed reality in the modern workplace team. So it's basically using the HoloLens and visualizing cancer cells. And then the last project we worked on was Minecraft and making it basically increasing customization so that it's more accessible to people who have autism spectrum disorder. So that's kind of what I did in the first term, and that was so much impact. And I would say I didn't actually ever reach that amount of impact ever again. But my next internship, I worked on shipping a like bookmarks feature and a notifications feature on docs.microsoft.com. And then this past summer, I worked on decreasing the number of 0 result searches in our site search. So there were a lot of kind of dead ends that you would reach by using our search. So how do we improve that as a whole? And yeah, so I think the mileage really varies, but usually your manager or whoever is picking your project has a good idea of what is achievable given how fast your team moves. So yeah, I think it's like you could do so much, you could do so little. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks. That's
Yeah,
great.
no problem.
That was a lot of projects, I mean.
Yeah, right. It's because of the garage. Like the 4 in the garage just feels like a lot.
Well, thanks for
I think
diving
Saul
in.
has a question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious, what would you say are some of the most important skills going into PM role, and how can you highlight them during interviews or just recruiting in general?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of ways you could go about this. I think there are a lot of strong product managers coming from a lot of different backgrounds. I can speak to my own background. So I come from like a very technical background. So my kind of strength will always be like, oh, okay, I've been able to build these projects before and I have strong experience in working with different tech stacks, and I understand what's feasible, what's not, and understand like what it takes to build something. So I think that's always going to be a plus. So if you study CS at school, or even like anything that requires you to build something, or you've taken computer science courses, like I think that's going to be the one skill that we can all bring to the table. And then in terms of like other kind of side things, I think having some like background in understanding how you can like process data would also be a good one. So like just like writing Python scripts, being able to like analyze telemetry and do data analysis, that would be like potentially one that you could go after. There's also PMs with strong like design intuition. You don't necessarily have to be a strong designer, but having strong like product sense and what is a good product and what is not, and visually what that looks like, and experience wise what that looks like. That's also like one way that you could go about it. And then there's like a lot of other soft skills, I think. So if you're a good presenter, or if you are a good writer, that all kind of comes into play. I remember one of my coworkers, prior to being a PM, she was actually in fashion design, and it's like so out of reach. Like it feels like, oh, it's like so far away. How did she make the transition into becoming a PM at a tech company? But then she also offers a really cool perspective of just like what works and what doesn't. And she can just look at something and know that right away. And I think those are like the transferable skills that you can always kind of bring up. But I feel like no matter what you study, there's always something that you can bring to the PM table. So I don't know. Yeah. What do you study?
I'm currently undeclared, but I transferred from a business school and I'm intending to study CS. So yeah.
Yeah, that feels like the perfect sweet spot intersection of the two things that you're studying. So yeah, fair enough.
Cool. Anyone else?
I actually wanted to ask on something that Sol talked about, and in a PM, I feel like a lot of PM jobs want all these like soft skills as like a requirement, and I think that's something like how you actually display that in like a resume or cover letter. Like before you even get the interview, how do you show off soft skills?
Yeah, so I think that could come from you being able to like build personal projects successfully. I think that says something about like, oh, okay, you're able to work with people, you're able to get something out the door. Like you have the grit to get it through, whatever, right? So there's like that. I think, yeah, there's that, and then there's also like showing your extracurriculars. So I think for me, I at the time like co-founded UBC Hacks, which is now NW Plus, and I think that and kind of starting to build out a team there, and working with so many people cross-functionally, really helped. And I think like they are able to see that through your resume. So I think like extracurriculars and clubs always help. And then you could also have like a personal portfolio or a website. So like for me, I minor in creative writing. So I have a blog that I just write random stuff on. But I think like through that, sometimes like, oh, it's like able to get across, okay, like she has some soft skills of like, she's able to communicate her thoughts or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of ways you can do it. I've also seen people like even some people just do YouTube videos and then linking that in their resume, and that's like cool. Or you have a podcast, you can link that too. Yeah, I think there's like a lot of little ways that you can turn your extracurriculars or passions or hobbies into things that you can put on your resume.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
Sounds good. Trisha?
Hi there. So when you're going into the PM role, so like you expect you're going to have to deal with a lot of teams, and then you have to communicate with all of them. But was there like an unexpected challenge that came with the role that you took? So like, oh, you realize, oh, I needed this skill, or like I needed to know this or something like that. So like, yeah, an unexpected challenge. So yeah.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think I had like one where when I was like in the role, I didn't realize that was the trouble that I was facing. But then when I was out of it, I started to realize. So one of them is like facing a lot of pushback from the team. So I don't know, I thought it was unexpected because I thought like I was brought onto the team and you told me to do this project, and turns out we don't have resources to do the project. So what's up with that? And then basically I went through like all the user research, did the initial prototypes, designs, spoke with the engineers, everything was good to go, and then one of the managers wouldn't sign off on it. I think it was like the front end manager wouldn't sign off on it. And so yeah, so then I just didn't really know what to do at the time, because I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm making a good case here of why we should be doing this, and I thought that we were on the same page about doing this. And then yeah, it didn't work out. And so I think one of the challenges is like being able to, yes, you're assigned a project, but you can't take it for granted. You can't just say, oh, because I'm an intern and they're going to have all the resources carved out for me, and my manager was with me every step of the way and they completely approve of this, so everyone's going to be on board. Because the truth is your manager's on board with what you're doing because they followed you every step of the way and they're invested in you and your project, but that's not everyone else. And they're also not spending their time advocating for you to everyone else. So other people just simply like don't know where you're at and why it's important. So if you're not able to articulate that, that becomes a problem. So I think for me, it was like I took so much of it for granted that I didn't realize, oh, okay, actually, why was this to me so important? And then so the next summer, went back, and in addition to user research this time, I did a lot of data analytics and actually being able to quantify the impact that I'm going to be able to make. And I think that was a harder sell, like that was an easier sell to the different managers on why we should work on something. So I think that's like figuring out what works for different people and getting your ideas across in a way that resonates with them, I think is something that I like learned in terms of like communication styles and yeah, how to get people on board, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah,
oh,
it
thank
does.
you. Thank you. But yeah, are we swapping? I would love to leave like my Facebook or something that so we can like stay in touch if you want.
Yeah,
feel
of course.
free to add me here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your insights, because I think what you described is quite common, not only in PM, but in the tech industry in general. I've experienced, stuff I have dug into, in my previous roles that, just was scrapped after like, spending hours and hours on it, and you just got to move on. And if you're not able to convince them, which is fine. Like, I mean, you'll get another project to work on. But again, data-driven decision-making is really powerful, and I'm glad you highlighted that. So every time you want to convince someone, I think PM's another term we use is influence without authority. And the best way to do that is through data, I think. So yeah, great thoughts on that. And yeah, feel free to connect with Charmaine. She's really, really helpful. She's going to answer all your questions, I'm sure. And thanks so much for coming on, Charmaine. I'm not sure when we are switching exactly. I think we have about a minute left. So if anyone has,
I think right
now.
Do I just
right
go?
now?
I'm just gonna go. Okay, cool.
Okay, bye.
Okay, thank you so
Charmaine.
much, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you too.
You're going to room 3, Charmaine. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
She knows.
yeah, I think she knows.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, we're
We
just gonna wait on
have-
Emma.
Yeah. Okay, go for it. Cool, great questions, guys. Thanks so much for being so interactive. I think you really like brought out a lot of important points from some of these speakers. So keep up the. Hopefully you found it useful. Oh, Karen, you're in the wrong room.
Why am I back here?
You love our room so much, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Emma's here. Okay, you can switch.
All right, let me jump out. Bye, guys.
All right, see you, Karen. Karen, you need to go to room 1.
Okay, I think she's such.
Awesome. Welcome, Emma. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Emma.
Okay.
Good.
Anyone has questions for Emma?
I can jump in with a bit more background too if it helps give you guys some context.
Sure. They've been asking great questions so far, but
Awesome.
feel free to
I
give a
hope
little
you
bit of
saved some
background.
good ones for me and you didn't exhaust them all on the other speakers. Or like reuse them, I don't know. I've had no idea what you've asked.
I mean, this is an opportunity. Okay, we have a question. Okay, so fine. Go ahead.
Hey, Emma. Hey, it's
Hey.
Ken. Yeah, actually, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the different projects and your roles in them that you got to experience because of the remote experience that you had this summer. And yeah, basically what kind of breadth you were able to get involved with.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess just to kick it off, Microsoft was my first PM role. I got into it because I thought it was project management, but because my favorite project manager from a previous co-op had gone into PM at Microsoft afterwards, and he said, you would love PM at Microsoft, you should come to PM at Microsoft. And I loved how he tackled this job, and really he was like the customer advocate and the one who managed the scope at the consultancy that we both worked at together. And so he was a PM in like a PM way in addition to a project management way. But anyway, when I ended up at Microsoft, my first 2 weeks were spent figuring out what the heck PM was, because it was not what I thought I signed up for. And after I realized it was all about being customer advocate, it was like, okay, this is awesome. Actually working with technical teams, super great. I had the chance to work on 3 different projects at Microsoft, 2 2-week ones and 1 3-month one. And that was created in such a way so that the Canadian interns could get started with these little hack style iterative, like, or barely iterative, like proof of concept style, like quick scope, get your devs to implement it, hand it in the week style projects. And then the American interns joined us in June, July, August. Yeah, so they joined us in June. And suddenly the numbers went up from like the smaller number of Canadian interns to all of the Americans as well, because they all have 3-month internships. And that's when we got our big projects. And so my role in that big project was to really scope it out. The first, like they gave us a problem and they didn't refine it too much beyond that. And so my first job was to check all of the assumptions that were already made, to dig into, you know, what demographic information they had, what data they had to back it up. Turns out not much. This is a hunch that they had, that they thought this would be a great feature. And so one of the very first things that I did was, you know, see if there was anything that we could use to justify this product. And a lot of that came down to, you know, understanding how this could really make a difference in people's lives. And so, like, I spent a lot of time just like sitting there trying to put myself in other people's shoes and be like, hey, like, why would this person care about this feature? Why would they benefit from it? How could this make their day better? And going from there. And I found that was actually, I was a little bit bummed, to be honest. Like, old Microsoft Garage projects involved like HoloLens with BC Cancer to look at scans and stuff. And because of the remote nature of this project, all of the Microsoft projects at the Garage were internal. And so I didn't get to work on HoloLens with BC Cancer. I was working on a feature within Microsoft Teams. And initially it was a bit of, I felt a bit disappointed that I wasn't going to get to work on such a high impact project. And then I spent a week convincing myself how high impact my project was. And I think that was like a key first step, because as soon as I believed in it, I could convince other people to believe in it. And narrative, I was telling the other group, like, narrative is the best tool that a PM could have in their pocket. Like, you need to be able to empathize with the people who are going to benefit from putting this thing out in the world. And you need to be able to convey that urgency that they might feel to people within the company who are going to then support it and help you turn this product idea into something real. And so once I did that, I was like part project manager, part product manager at Microsoft. Like, the program manager role is very flexible, but I was running daily stand-ups, and a day would be, you know, it could be user interviews in the morning, it could be design click-throughs with the designer in the afternoon, and then you could finish the day off with a high-level architecture meeting with your devs. And that kind of diversity was crazy and really fun, and it definitely kept me on my toes. And I kind of realized that PM was something I wanted to do when, after my engineering internship, like sitting at a computer all day, every day, not my shtick. Like, I would just get tired. I stopped being productive. I loved coming up with a solution. I loved knowing how to implement it. And I didn't actually love just sitting there alone and implementing it. And so PM, as something that operates in the problem and solution space without the nitty-gritty of sitting down and debugging for hours, was something that really appealed to me. And so I got to take all that learning from Microsoft and apply where I am right now. I'm in a company of 7 people, if you count me, and I'm PMing my own project. So I'm working on the software side, but also this project idea came to me with no scope and no spec and no client interaction about it whatsoever, just a couple of suggestions. And so the roles, I guess, and I've gone on a total tangent here, have changed drastically. I've gone from a super structured, this is how to be a PM type of situation within Microsoft, to a super unstructured, we have this idea, can you scope it and validate it and implement it? by yourself, and any ideas you have, totally fly. You're 1/7 of the company. You can do whatever you want. Like, go. I don't think I'd have been as excited to be where I am right now if I'd done them in the opposite order. I think I would have probably felt really lost. But being given the structure I had over the summer and then having the chance to implement the things that I learned through that right now, with the exception that instead of nagging my devs, I'm nagging myself with deadlines and things. It's been a really interesting sort of change of pace. But yeah, at the end of the day, the thing that gets me most excited about PMing is people and the capacity that projects have to make their lives better. And I think as soon as you can get behind your product for that reason, then you can get everyone else behind it with you. Long story, but yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's super helpful and good to know that you don't always necessarily believe in your own product until you make yourself believe in it.
Yeah, it was a harsh reality to be faced with, honestly. But then I thought about like the one person or one situation where this product was actually going to let someone go through their workday with a lot more dignity, or it was going to let them, tackle a problem that otherwise they would have relied on other people for. And as soon as I had that person in mind, it was like, I'm designing it for this person. Their life is going to get better. Microsoft Teams has millions of users. That person probably exists in some capacity, or maybe there are other people who share that person's problems. And suddenly the project mattered a lot more to me. And so, yeah, changing your own view of it is important if you need it to be.
Yes. Emma, thanks so much for sharing that. I think you really highlighted, like a lot of people here have asked, what skills should I highlight, soft skills, and, what skills does a PM need to be successful? And I think your experience kind of like, I would say to everyone, just kind of look at this story and look at what kind of challenges Emma faced or what anyone faced and be like, okay, what skills could have helped me or what skills were essential? And she pointed out so many, like she pointed out user empathy. She pointed out, influencing without authority, which is basically, using data to make sure that you're getting people behind your project. And I think those are quite valuable. So just definitely, I would say one thing that's helped me a lot is listening to people's story and then kind of gauging what things help them and what things I can learn to make my experience better when I become a PM. But yeah, thanks so much for telling us about that.
Yeah, thanks for sitting through it. I tend to go on rants, so someone please shut me up if I should be answering a different question.
I actually have a question.
Yeah,
so I
sure.
realized that you're in the Microsoft Garage, and I was just wondering what the difference in the application process is like from the Microsoft Intern and the Microsoft Garage Intern application process. How would it differ? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the actual Microsoft Garage program is up in the air for next summer just because of the remote nature of things. So I don't think the applications are open yet. I don't really know what's going to be happening there, but basically, like, the program will continue. It's just whether it's going to happen next summer is a bit of a question mark. The regular Microsoft Intern application, as I understand it, is you send in your application, you have a 25-minute first-round interview, then you have your on-site, and the on-site is normally just 5 people, each asking you like hour-long questions, and often they're programming questions, they're on the board. If you're a PM, they might be like spec questions or product design questions. Apparently, in most cases, there's like a lunch where they kind of gauge your personal skills while you're eating lunch. The Garage didn't vary from that format too much. I had the 25-minute first round screening. It wasn't over the phone because UBC has the Center for Careers, and so I got to do my first screening in person. I totally hijacked that kind of by accident. I was excited to tell them about why I was excited to work at Microsoft, and I walked in, the guy handed me his marker and was like, you're gonna have 20 minutes to solve a programming question on the board, and then 5 minutes to ask me questions, capiche? And I was like, no, not capiche. Oh my goodness, this is not what I prepared for at all. Like, it was, but I didn't want to spend 20 minutes of that interview programming on the board. And so what I did, and this could have been a really bad idea, was I was holding the marker and I was like, yeah, sounds great. But first, would you mind if I told you a little bit about why I'm so excited to work here? And he was like, yeah, sure, let's sit down. And so we sat down and I talked him through how everything I've done to date made me a perfect candidate for Microsoft and how I was so excited about Microsoft. And I mentioned that I had a couple of software co-ops under my belt. I mentioned that I was interested in PM. And then he said, do you know what? I'm going to assume you could answer the programming question that I was going to ask you. Let's talk through a design problem instead.
Oh, wow.
And so this isn't specific to the garage. This is just me. At the time, I thought it was totally sabotaging my chances, but I guess it worked out. He thought that was valuable enough exchange, and we worked through a design problem, which I found way more interesting than recursively finding a way to identify all the images in the file tree. And sort of beyond that, we just had a great conversation, and then that ended. And then I was like, crap, I just ruined any chance that, you know, he was going to have like an even, like, sort of quantitative way of assessing me compared to everyone else. And so I'm totally off. Like, there's no way that that's going to work. And then it did, which absolutely shocked me. And here I am thinking PM is project management because I knew nothing at the time. And so I prepared for the interview, the on-site, by going through all of cracking the coding interview, expecting coding questions. They don't ask coding questions for PM interview, like, for the most part. So that was my other mistake. The garage specifically for the on-site, I'd say the biggest difference is that you have a 10-minute presentation about yourself before the 5 one-hour interviews. And in those 10 minutes, you're in front of a panel. I think it was like 8 people, and 4 of them were going to become like my featured interviewers in the afternoon that day. It was like a 5 or 6 hour day. I had 10 minutes to explain to them who I was, what I valued, interesting things I'd worked on, and why I was a good fit at Microsoft. And that was terrifying. But I, you know, practiced it like crazy, and I tried to find an interesting way that was going to be different and memorable and better than, hello, I'm Emma, and I want to be a PM at Microsoft, and Microsoft is a cool company, and here's a project I did at school. I spent embarrassing amounts of time trying to find an interesting way to tell them about myself, and I think it worked. Well, it worked out. I would say if you do end up at that stage, like, try to make the presentation not just about you, but told in a way that is you, if that makes sense. So trying to break the formula a little bit there. And I started by explaining to them something I was really excited about. And so that's a way that I helped to sort of get people on board. But then the actual interview questions were insane. And I don't know whether this is the garage or not, but one of the questions was like, I've seen your portfolio, I've seen everything you've done, what are you doing next? And I answered that question, and then he said, okay, and what do you want to learn from that? And I answered, and then he said, and what else do you want to learn? And then I answered, and then he said, and what else do you want to learn? And for 10 minutes, I was just digging through my brain, like, what on earth else do I want to learn from this project that I was telling him about? And then we sort of changed it, and it became more of a product design question, something along the lines of, you're at Microsoft, you have unlimited money, just assume that. Here's a problem, how would you solve it? But yeah, it's definitely, they try to break the walls down a little bit. I think the garage is, I think we're at time.
Sorry, I'm not interrupt, but I think we're closing in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one quick thing. I've gone through the regular process, and it's basically 4 final round interviews, and then 1 first round, like Emma described. Mine was on campus. Feel free to connect with Emma on the LinkedIn link she just sent. But that was the basic. Yeah, that was the basic outline, very similar to Garage. Okay, we have a minute extra, I think. So if anyone wants to ask the last question. Oh, Emma left. Never mind.
Yeah, we'll just go back to the main room and kind of wrap up things with everyone.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone.
See you guys there.
Bye.
I think if I was the lady who recorded that, I would be sick of my voice at this point.
Exactly. So yeah, does anybody have any like questions that they want to get started with? If not, Emma, if you just want to talk a little bit more about your experience to start off with, maybe starting with Microsoft and then moving on to your experience also at your current company. And we can have like questions also trickle in after that.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I was at the Microsoft Garage this summer, which is a program that normally involves 3 different groups of 25 students at 3 different locations around North America. And the difference this summer was that everything was remote, and so they decided to merge those programs. And so there were 75 of us approximately, all working together in groups of 4 to 6. I believe, 4 to 6, 4 to 8. In order to develop solutions to different problems that were pitched to us at the beginning of the summer. So the way that that kicked off was that we had 2 hackathon weeks that involved like really quickly iterative sort of hack style projects. As a PM in that position, my job was to scope out the project as quickly as possible to better understand the problem that we needed to solve and to figure out what our developer skills, were and how we could leverage them to get the best possible solution and proof of concept handed over to an internal Microsoft client. So one of them was the open source Power Toys group within Microsoft, which if you have a Windows machine and you don't have Power Toys, you should definitely download it. It's basically like discovering a candy store for your PC. There are so many really interesting tools that you can use. And so we got to build new ones of those. After that was another one that I can't talk about, but basically the whole project over the summer was a larger project within Microsoft Teams, and we were given a problem, something that people are often faced with as a challenge while using the platform. And it was my job over the course of the summer to work in tandem with the developers and our designer, who I've actually stayed in touch with since. Now we're working on something else together, but that's a different story. To develop and deliver the best possible solution. So this is different than other PM internships normally, because a lot of technical PM internships have, like, as a final project, a spec. So something that outlines the problem, what you think the solution should be, and all of the details of that solution. And at the garage, you were actually developing that information at the same time as your devs were working on stuff. So there was a lot of stopping and checking and sort of redefining the scope and trying not to make your devs too mad as you ask them to change things, as you got more user feedback and sort of more information about the problem itself. And so that was a really interesting experience. We had access to, once the feature went out into its first sort of ring, and so we have different release rings that release to different people at different times. We suddenly got metrics at how many people were using it, how they were interacting with it. We put all these little snippers on it so that we could tell where people's clicks were going, and to make sure and validate our assumptions that the product would be used the way that it was. And so it was almost like in the implementation of the scientific process, it just, you've got your hypothesis, you develop a product, and then you check to see whether the solution met your expectations. And iterate. It was a lot of changing things based on that information and going from there. But the people-centered aspect was really, really cool.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Would you like to also talk a little bit about how that compares to your experience in your current co-op?
Yeah, totally. So currently I'm working at a company called VotaSafe. And keeping in mind, Microsoft has about 150,000 employees. VotaSafe has 7 if you count me. And so the scale change was really interesting. And I've had the opportunity to kind of define my own role here. They hired me for a software position, and I mentioned I was interested in product or program management. And so what they've allowed me to do is develop the scope of the solution that I'm working on, to perform user research studies, to work with my friend, the Microsoft intern, who was the designer on my team at the garage, to develop a new UI that we're working on, and to fully PM my way through this software-based co-op. And so in terms of role definition, I've had a lot more autonomy when it comes to how I want to run it. I know that the Microsoft Garage internship gave me a lot of structure that I can implement now. So I don't think it would have worked as well if I did it in the other order. But the PM training and mentorship that I got at Microsoft allowed me to tackle this problem in a new way that I'm hoping is going to be successful. But it sort of gave me a formula for at least a software, like a mobile software project, and how to best implement a solution based on the information that you're given, and how to get more information. I think that's the other thing. The PM needs to know. You need to be subject matter experts in whatever it is that you're working on, and not just subject matter experts, but experts on your subjects. So the people who are going to be using the device in the first place, or the design, or the prototype, or the feature, the product, you need to know them in and out, just like you need to know the solution in and out. And that's why it strikes a really interesting balance between technical and personal work.
That's awesome. That sounds great. If people have any questions regarding anything Emma has said, or just some generic questions that they also want to ask about PM, we highly encourage you to switch on your mics and just ask, or if you want to also send those questions via chat, that would be great. So just gonna wait a few seconds here. If anybody has any questions. Okay, Vanessa, I see your hands up. Would you like to unmute?
Yeah, I just want to ask, what made you make the switch from such a big company into a small one, and which one do you prefer?
That's a good question. I am going back to Microsoft next summer, so I definitely really enjoyed that experience. My prime motivator behind switching from a big company to a small one was to make sure that I got as much breadth as possible through my remaining work terms. So I'd worked in research, I'd worked in a medium-sized company, Microsoft was huge, and I hadn't had that small sort of scrappy startup environment. And that was something I was looking for before graduation. So GoToSafe came along and they were a perfect chance for that. In terms of which one I like better, I think it really is apples to oranges, and the one that you're gonna like better depends a lot on who you are as a person. And so, you know, the garage provided me with the structure that I needed to better understand the role, to understand its strengths and its weaknesses, to understand my strengths and weaknesses in the position, because I had a pretty prescriptive idea of what a good PM was. And then moving into the startup space, suddenly all those regulations were out the window, and the people I'm working with don't have app development experience. I was brought in for that experience, for the technical experience, and the PM sort of came along with that. And the scoping was going to be my responsibility whether I had PM experience or not. And so I was able to better tackle that part of the project and to take a lot of creative freedoms when it came to my own timeline, the structure of sort of the user focus that I wanted to have, so who I was going to talk to and when. And I got to set my own deliverables in my own timeline. So I think that freedom was really exciting, to be able to bring that kind of, you know, the learned structure to the table in a more open space was great. I think, again, like I said, if it had been in the other order, I would have definitely liked Microsoft better, because I would have been where I am right now, having no idea what to do. But having completed them in the order that I did, I think that being on a smaller team, once you have that structured experience, opens up a lot more doors when it comes to how you want to spend your time and the people that you choose to work with. Whereas being at a bigger company provides you the structure when you're just getting started, which was huge for me. And I think that, I mean, as you move up in seniority as well, I'm sure you get a little bit more freedom, but big companies have a lot of inertia. And so Microsoft with 150,000 people isn't going to be as swayed by my ideas as this little company is. And this little company where I'm 1/7 of the company has taken on a bunch of my ideas and run with them in a way that's really validating, but also in a way that helps me really see the impact of the work that I'm doing. So I think it comes down to what you value. I mean, they've both been remote, which has been interesting as well. I'd be curious to talk to myself in an alternate universe where they weren't, to get a better sense of, you know, what eventually the work is going to be like in person. But yeah, I think that there were things that I loved and am loving about both experiences. I think maybe for the remote format, Microsoft might win out just a little, because that imposed structure with work from home was definitely nice. And I think the one thing I've struggled with a little bit more freedom on this end when I'm not going into work is making sure that I'm working when I should be working and not working when I shouldn't be. Yeah, that's a long-winded response, but hopefully.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Great question, Vanessa. Michael, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Vanessa. So you said you worked with developers a lot. So I'm wondering if there was like any instance where you like worked with a developer and the developer wasn't like on board with your idea. How did you handle that situation?
Yeah, so there's a stereotype within the dev world that PMs are people who come to them with like basically asking to make pigs fly. A PM that doesn't connect with developers is somebody who doesn't have an understanding necessarily of the technical, you know, requirements of certain implementations, like or certain solutions, I guess. Like if I were to ask someone to do something that I thought was very simple, but I didn't understand that it was actually going to take 3 weeks of work on the back end for my dev, just asking for them to change it in the next couple of days really wouldn't land well. And so I think I've been lucky in that my background in software has allowed me to mostly avoid those situations. But the biggest tensions that I've noticed between PMs and devs is, PM is innately iterative in the sense that you are constantly revising your designs and your requirements based on the people that you speak with. And, you get V1 of an app out into the hands of a certain focus group, and you'll get feedback on it. And suddenly a bunch of things are going to have to change, and the devs are going to have to delete that code and replace it with something new. And that's where a lot of the tensions arise. My general approach to tackling that kind of stuff, I guess as an example, there was a late stage change that we almost definitely needed to make, because all of the feedback from our first round of sort of focus group people at Microsoft was like, okay, everything works really well except for this thing, which really doesn't, and so it needs to change. And so I went to my devs and I was like, hey, here's the feedback. Everything works except for this thing, which really doesn't, and so it needs to change. And immediately they were like, oh, we spent weeks on that feature, and we think it's fine. Like, can't we just keep it in? And this is where you kind of have to play the, the customer's advocate. And that's a key part of the PM role, is really making it clear that, like, this isn't coming from you. Like, at the end of the day, we're designing this solution for people who, have a problem, or who have a gap that will be filled by this product. If our goal at the end of the day as a team is to improve somebody's life through this solution, our judgment doesn't really matter. And so finding common ground there, like, everyone wants to put out the best possible product. And so to say, I think this feature is great, you think this feature is great, but the people we've spoken to, the people who are actually going to be using it, they don't seem to agree. They don't have the same, background history, depth of understanding of this product. They don't understand everything behind the scenes. And to them, this just wasn't worth the effort that we put in. And so sort of finding that common ground between yourself and the dev by sort of uniting behind this shared goal of creating a product that your customers are going to love is I have found at least the best way to garner a little bit of empathy from your developers. I try really hard not to be the PM that goes to my devs and is like, all right, throw all this out and now build something entirely new because this is what our customers say. Generally good scoping and early and often feedback, or I guess early and frequent feedback, is a good way to try to prevent that as much as possible, but you can't avoid everything. I think, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Michael. Does anybody else have any questions? I think we're coming closer to finishing the session. So if somebody has
2 minutes.
One more, maybe if they have one final question, we can go ahead and ask the final question.
Sure. How do you avoid scope creep, or like any tips to avoid it?
Scope creep is the enemy of all PMs. I think that one way to avoid scope creep is to accept it as an intrinsic part of the scoping process. And what I mean by that is build out your scope expecting creep to happen in some way or another. I mean, like, the best way to prevent scope creep is to constantly be checking back to your requirements on day one and say, is this still what we're building? Is this still our goal? Because the first timeline that you put out and the first scope that you put out is going to be in response to a given set of facts. As you gain more facts, you might have to make adjustments, and that's just kind of natural. You're going to uncover more information as you go. I think the biggest challenge with that is scope, budget, timeline creep. And so staying true to your original requirements is important if you don't want this scope to creep at all. But I would argue that if you want to make the best product, build a little bit of buffer space for scope creep into your, I don't even call it scope creep as much as it is just sort of like iterate on your product goals often and reassess your timelines, figure out what's important, figure out what's not. Turns out if feature B is actually really worth keeping, maybe feature C is less important, and so you can adjust the timelines accordingly. And I think that making sure that there's room for flexibility and for trade-offs and a little bit of buffer room can definitely help you to keep a project within scope. Keeping in mind that scope, oh goodness, I can't talk today. Scope is a really dynamic thing. And so, at least in my experience, either building in that buffer space, understanding it's going to be flexible, and constantly checking back on like the axioms of your project to make sure that they're still true is a way to make sure that you are on top of it every step of the way. And you can catch it if it starts going too fast. But yeah, if you have any other ideas for scope creep, definitely let me know because I still struggle with it sometimes. / often.
That's awesome.
Stay true to the customer. When in doubt, stay true to the customer.
That's awesome. Thanks, Emma. I think we've just about reached the end of this particular session. So if you also just want to switch to the next one. Thanks a lot.
Guys.
Really appreciate it. Yeah. All right. We're just waiting on the next speaker to join this room. So
Awesome. Have speakers switched yet? Oh,
I think
he's switching already. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I guess we'll just keep in touch on Slack then. I think one room is still wrapping up, but yeah, we should be good.
Great.
I think, yeah, it's room 2. That's why you guys are waiting for a speaker.
Thanks again for the questions, Michael and Vanessa. Others also have questions, and if you guys don't feel maybe too comfortable switching on your mic and asking, that's absolutely fine. Please just go ahead and send a question via the chat, and I can relay that to the speaker. Hey, Charmaine.
Hey.
How's it going? It's good. How was the previous session?
It was good. It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been
Awesome.
a while, Ritik.
Yeah, it has. So the previous session, we just structured it by with the speaker just going into a little bit of detail about their past experience, and then we just delve right into the audience's questions. So if we can maybe do something similar here too, if you just want to talk about your past experience a little bit, and we can delve into questions.
Wait, Karen, am I in the wrong room?
Oh no, wait.
I'm not sure. I was told to jump into this room, but I think I'll go over to 1.
Oh.
Oh, wait.
But you came
No,
from
it doesn't look like.
Hello.
Yeah.
I think Emma went to the wrong room. Maybe.
Okay. So
Yeah.
should I go to room 2?
Yeah,
No, that's.
room 2, I think.
I just came from room 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'll go.
Charmaine, do you mind popping into room 2?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Perfect.
Thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
Karen,
thanks,
take it
guys.
away.
Yeah, for
Great.
sure.
Yes.
Oh, should I just introduce myself?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you caught this, but I was just saying to Charmaine, the previous speaker, we just structured it with the speaker just going into their experience, talking about their experience for the first few minutes, and we just delved right into the questions of the audience. So if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of experience, I started off working as a QA engineer for a health tech company called Thrive Health. So I worked there for 8 months as an intern, and then I worked 4 months at BC Children's Hospital for a work learn on the IT and IM operations team. So I was a project coordinator there, and then I jumped into a role at Samsung as a PM on their product strategy team for 8 months. So this was from January to August of this year. And right now I'm working as a PM/software developer for UBC Faculty of Medicine. So I help them create their virtual labs. But yeah, that's all the technical experience I've had. Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Do you also just want to talk about maybe just a little bit about your experience in Samsung in terms of PM, like, and just in a little more detail, what exactly your role entailed? So if people have any specific questions that they'd like to ask.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I know in my previous breakout group, I was talking about kind of the day-to-day tasks that I had at Samsung. And I was telling them, every day was very different. So it's really true when they say that a product manager wears a bunch of different hats, because you really don't have the same task to do every day. And I was just honestly constantly in meetings the whole time. But for my first 4 months at Samsung, my tasks were more business strategy based. So this was because I was mainly working on a product called the Knox Partner Program. So this is a global program for business tools and kind of teaching people how to integrate Samsung tools with other business needs. My second half of my Samsung co-op was actually an extension. So I actually got to work on a new product that I don't think I can really talk about much right now because it hasn't been launched, but it was a lot more technical. I got to kind of participate and be able to define the product vision a little bit more. And I also was able to kind of figure out approaches as to how we were going to implement specific strategies and partner up with companies like Ford and Siemens and IBM. So it was a lot of constant meetings, a lot of deep thinking, trying to figure out how we were going to incorporate our systems with their systems. And I'd say it was a bit more technical because I had to kind of have a prior knowledge on how machine learning works. So it's really product based. Depending on what product you're working on, your day-to-day tasks could differ like very widely.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds great. If anybody has questions that they just like to ask about anything Karen was talking about or other generic questions, that's good. Please ask via the chat or tune in. Yes, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, so you had experience as a IT project coordinator before. What would you say are some similarities from like that coordinator role to the product management role?
I think I didn't really have too much structure in my role as a product coordinator at the hospital, but also my role was 10 hours a week. So it was part of a work learn program. So I didn't really get much say into what I kind of got to work on. Whereas contrasting that with Samsung, I got to kind of choose what products I wanted to work on, what kind of features I was interested in. But I mean, I did do a lot of kind of strategizing and I was always constantly in team meetings as well for my project coordinator role. And even though the role was only 10 hours a week, I was able to kind of contribute new ideas as to how current processes were working at the BC Children's Hospital. And so I guess you could say that that kind of transferred into my role as a PM at Samsung, where I was always constantly in meetings and always got to kind of figure out approaches and new strategies and kind of implement new features. But the roles were pretty different, I'd have to say. I don't think the role in the BC Children's Hospital was like a typical project coordinator role. I know project management and product management do have very similar, similarities, but at the same time, they're very widely different scopes. I would say, even though you do take charge and delegate tasks for a project and for a product, the overall scope is very different. And instead of, and I found that I had to be more customer focused in my product role. And whereas in my project role, I was kind of given kind of what my focus should be and then made decisions based on that.
Great. So Karen, we have a question here via chat. It says, can you elaborate more on the first term of your PM role at Samsung? What aspects / examples of business strategy did you apply?
Yeah, for sure. So my first term at Samsung, again, I was talking to you about the Knox Partner Program. So that was my main product. And actually the pain point that they found when analyzing the success of the Knox Partner Program was the fact that they couldn't provide analytics to the stakeholders that were kind of located all around the globe. And so a lot of these stakeholders didn't know how well the product was doing. They only knew the analytics for their own countries. And so my biggest task was to implement kind of a dashboard for them that highlights KPI metrics as well as license activation numbers, and give them insight on basically how well the whole program was doing as a whole. And so a lot of my first term at Samsung had to do with analytics. So I was always constantly speaking to the data team, trying to figure out ways to kind of highlight the best sort of data that could be shown. And I was always talking to the UX and the design teams and how we can best illustrate this so that people could visualize it in an easy manner instead of having to go into lots of data and like Tableau, for example. So I'd say really some business strategy that I had to apply was being able to be very analytical and being able to kind of understand how you can evaluate metrics and how you can evaluate the success of a product. I think it really did take many iterations for me to get a good dashboard going, but you always have the help of all your other PM team members as well as everyone else in the company to kind of guide you in the right direction. And I found that that was really, really worthwhile for me. And I'm not sure if that answered your question, but.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a thank you. So I guess, does anybody have any other questions? Again, I think we have time for one more question before we also have to end this session. If not, then I do also have a question regarding just like your transition into the PM role. Do you have any advice about what you can do to also, build your skills so that you can get an internship in the PM role? I know you didn't have a specific PM experience before you got into Samsung. So what exactly does it take to break into the role?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to really diversify your experience in terms of PM. I found that something that kind of made me stand out in terms of applying for this role was not actually my technical background, because I didn't come from a traditional computer science background. And it was actually the fact that I had varying experiences, whether that be in school clubs, working in marketing or in corporate relations, or even designing new products, as well as being in QA and in software development. So just being able to kind of understand all of these departments, working in tech previously, and knowing how these departments kind of work together and collaborate to form a product was really insightful and something that they definitely look for in an intern. But I also find that being very, very curious about technology in general and showing that you're very passionate in what you do is also a key factor in being successful in landing a PM internship, because I find that there's not one specific skill that people are looking for. It's normally a variety of different skills, and as long as you can show that you have that general sense and that general product sense, but at the same time are very open to learn, you do well, and you'd be able to land a product management role for sure. Also transitioning to this role, I initially was a QA engineer, so I really didn't have much experience in product management at all. And I really did suffer from imposter syndrome at the very beginning, because I knew, as there aren't that many PM roles out there, especially for internships. And I was constantly told by my co-op advisors that, oh, you should probably broaden your scope and not just look for PM roles because you probably won't be able to compete against people with CS majors. But I think you definitely just have to go for it. It's more of, I think it definitely is more of a numbers game, and apply to as many PM internships as you can, even though you don't feel like you personally are qualified for it, because you never know. And that's kind of what happened to me for my role at Samsung. I definitely didn't feel like I could land a role at a big company working in PM from my background, but you really just have to go for it and just be very passionate and curious as to what the tech environment kind of entails. I think I need to switch rooms now.
You can wrap up if you're not done.
Nah, I think that was perfect timing. I
That
think
was
she just
perfect
finished,
timing.
right?
Okay,
Nice.
sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, but feel free if y'all have any questions or you just want to share what you're up to. Feel free to speak up.
Good stuff. Okay, hey Charmaine again. Yeah, so again, just the same thing that we discussed last time. If you just want to go into your experience first and questions.
Yeah, for sure. So I've done PM internships at Microsoft Garage, and then also in their developer relations team that falls under cloud and AI. And then prior to that, I did software engineering roles at Pinterest, Slack, SAP. So yeah, feel free to ask about those. I also minor in creative writing if that's of interest to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody has any questions? Michael, please.
Yeah. Hey, Charmaine, do you have any tips for answering product design questions or
Product
approaching
design
them?
Yeah. So I think you already know like about in terms of like the circles method and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I think after you've kind of nailed down like circles, I think the next step is like kind of being able to like formulate circles. And for those of you who don't know, circles is a framework of answering product design questions. So it goes like C is like for comprehending the situation, I is for identifying the users, I think. R is I actually forgot. Do you remember?
Report customer needs.
Oh, report customer needs. And then I think it's like cut through prioritization. And then L is list all of your ideas or something like that. And then like basically just like wrap up on what you decided on and like summarizing everything. So so like there's that framework, and then you could go beyond that by kind of reformulating it so that it kind of changes a bit every time. And so I think that the way that I try to do that is if you're interviewing with a specific company, understanding their goals and what they actually care about. So like maybe a company really cares about, so I would say like maybe Microsoft, right? A place that you see a lot of products that have products that have a lot of functionalities and they do everything. So whether you like that or not is kind of one thing, but you know that that's kind of the decision that they always make, is they always try to like encompass all their users for some reason. And sometimes it becomes kind of bulky, but understanding that, how would you then treat differently? Could you now afford to take a couple more of those solutions that you had and then match them together? Or do you think that now Microsoft has that and it's a problem, and so they should steer away from that? So you should spend extra emphasis on choosing only one and focusing really heavily on one. So I think it's like stuff like that, like really understanding what the company's design choices are and what their product decisions are based off of, and then going after that. I think other things would be thinking about like what else is important beyond just like, oh, having a customer, their need? Are there things beyond that? So if you're talking to maybe like Apple, they have really awesome design language. Things are meant to be really simple and intuitive. Can you add that as a bullet that you're going to check for, hey, like I'm going to design a solution that's great, and it's also going to have to be simple. So something like that, like keep thinking about where you're interviewing, what the product should be like, and like reframing the framework based on that, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. So we also just want to encourage people to ask like any questions they want. So even if it does pertain to interviewing or anything of that sort, please do feel free. It doesn't have to be just some generic, like super generic question. So yeah. Have other questions? Because Charmaine has a lot of experiences, so you can definitely ask like very specific questions.
Hi, Charmaine. I was wondering what, I guess, employers or people that, I guess, screen, what do they look for? I'm not sure if there's like a portfolio section for PM stuff or if that's more like UX-y, but what do they look for to be able to get you into an interview?
Okay, yeah, I can tell you like, I guess just anecdotally of like what I think works, because definitely have never been in the shoes of like being able to hire people, etc. But I think things that they look for in terms of resume, how it would differ from like a regular maybe like software engineering resume, is like being a lot more impact focused. So like, what is the result of your work, and less so focused on how you built it. And then yeah, being able to like talk about why it's important. So like maybe just spending an extra like half a line or one bullet in your resume and talking about like, oh, I built this to solve this problem. I think stuff like that, that's really important. And then also having like extracurriculars, I can imagine that being really good, because they always kind of look for people who are like have like a variety of skill sets. And so oh, okay, I just saw the question. Okay, but anyway, I'll get to that later. But yeah, so like your extracurriculars and like being able to show that, okay, like maybe you're a part of a club or you've organized events before, and you have the grit to push projects from start to finish. You have good teamwork, you're able to lead a team, etc. So I think there's stuff like that. And then I think like in terms of portfolio or like personal website, mine is more or less what I had when I was a software engineer. So just like listing the personal projects that I had. I have a blog because I write, but I wouldn't say that's necessary. And mine aren't even like tech related blog posts. A lot of times they're just like random stuff. So I think, yeah, like having a website where they can like further look into what you've done might be helpful. And there's like a lot of ways that you can showcase your work without them talking to you. So whether that be like, oh, you make YouTube videos in your free time, or you have a podcast, stuff like that, like it just kind of shows like, oh, okay, like they're really interested in this kind of stuff and they go above and beyond. But honestly, I would say that the more I like look at it, the more I feel like the initial thing isn't even so much like your resume. It's like more so like you just have to get your foot in the door. And that's tough because PM positions are so scarce, and it's so hard to even get them to give you the chance, especially if you have no experience. No matter how nice your resume looks, if you don't have a PM experience, they don't really want to talk to you. And so I think in that circumstance, really like, I think getting to know people at the company and like trying to get your foot in the door that way might actually be more effective than trying to polish your resume. But that's kind of subjective, and I've never tried that, but it's just something that I feel like I'm realizing now.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Does that answer your question?
No, yeah, it definitely does. That's like the part that I struggle with, is like trying to, I guess, get your foot in the door, because it's easy to just like put a resume into like a black box and then get an email later or something. So And it's especially tough now, especially with COVID and stuff. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, agreed. It's like thinking of like creative ways to get someone to actually look at your resume, I feel like is the other part. I can also answer like Judy's question about what made you decide to make the switch from developer to PM. I think like the biggest thing is that there's no harm in doing it. I think that being a good software engineer makes you a better PM. Being a good PM makes you a better software engineer. So in that sense, sometimes I feel like when you're a software engineer and you've done a bunch of software like internships, your skill set starts to plateau where you kind of realize, okay, like I kind of get that if I'm given these problems, I think I kind of have an idea of how to solve them, and I know how to work with the team to solve them, and I know how much time it's going to take me, etc. And then I know like what parts maybe I'll need help with, you know. But then I think switching to PM like helps you visualize the other part of all that work, and I think it kind of makes you a better software engineer. So like in that sense, I feel like that's the easiest thing. The easiest jump for me is like, okay, I'm not going to lose anything from doing this. I think that's the main thing. And then in terms of like why though, I think so when you're a software engineer, you get to build products, but a lot of the decision making is like taken out. So you're given a lot of maybe freedom in terms of like technical implementation details or how you actually decide to build the product. And of course, like you can, as a software engineer, you can like push back and be like, actually PM, I don't think this should be done, or this just doesn't make sense based on the architecture that we have, right? Like it's completely obviously an open dialogue, but I think it's, I realized that I wasn't really practicing the muscles of like, okay, this is a good product and this isn't. And I didn't really understand that. So I wanted to like understand that better. Because I think a lot of us go into CS wanting to just build fun, awesome things. So I feel like being a PM allowed me to do that. But in a realistic way, probably my dream role is like a hybrid of the two realistically. But yeah, maybe being a technical PM for now is the way to go when there's no clear hybrid roles available.
Amazing. Anybody else? Questions?
Or even if you just want to talk about like where you are in the pipeline of interviewing or applying, can you talk a bit more about, yeah, for sure, in the AI team at Microsoft, yeah. So I've worked with them in different ways, but I can talk about, I guess like when I was in the garage and we had projects directly with Microsoft Research and the AI team there, and then built, we did like 2 projects. One was the AI snipping tool and the other was a chest mobile x-ray analysis app, which is you could take a picture of a chest x-ray and then we can tell you what we think might be happening in the x-ray image. And so it kind of it helps with decision making. It's like a decision making aid type of thing. And both of those released as research projects and they were open sourced. And so I would say the AI teams, I don't know like what specifically you're interested in, but a lot of them are more research heavy than regular product teams. Or maybe specifically that team was in Microsoft Research. So a lot more research heavy. A lot more people have really high degrees, like PhDs and masters and stuff like that, more than I've seen in any other team. And you have the option of releasing things as research projects instead of products, which is what we ended up doing in open sourcing projects. So that was like kind of that experience, but then you could also work on AI in the sense of you're working on like Azure ML Studio or something. And that experience would be really different if you're working on the platform to help other people build AI. So yeah. If there's a specific part of the experience that you're interested in, happy to try to dive deeper into it. But yeah, that was great. Yeah. I'd also love to drop my maybe like my Facebook if anyone wants to like stay in touch or want to talk through anything I can just leave my link. But
Absolutely.
yeah, feel free to add me there. Okay.
Thanks, Charmaine.
Yeah, no worries.
Yep. And also, I think, yeah, we're approaching sort of the last 1 minute mark. So I think we can also sort of transition out of this room now. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm just gonna end the recording here.
But yeah, in the meanwhile, how did that all go? I know that we had a bit of an issue in the beginning with the breakout rooms in terms of transitioning, but I hope that went smoothly. In terms of the speakers, how did that go? I want to hear from, I guess, our speakers, execs, etc. Anything, I guess, like super insightful that you'd want to share with everyone since we're all back in the main room?
I just wanted to say people have really good questions. So thank you. I was not prepared, but it was great.
Awesome.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks for doing this so late at night. I feel like everyone's probably tired and over school and stuff, so it's probably tough to come to events like this. So thanks for doing it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for being a speaker too. It's a lot of work answering those questions as well. Cool. We can move on
Actually,
to
Andy.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of get insight that I noticed. So a lot of people really were interested in knowing about sorry. Yep. What resource, I guess, like what skills that need to pick up on to be good as a PM. And I think I mentioned this in one of my in room number 2, but I think the best way to do this is to kind of look at what people have experienced, so like learn from people's stories like today, and kind of extract out some of the challenges they face and like what skills they would gain if they overcome it. So like, for example, Charmaine talked about how her project was going to be scrapped, but then she learned from that using data to convince people is a very good strategy. So there you go. You have one skill where you can, work on your data analysis to like kind of say, okay, can I take a product and can I take an idea that I have and kind of put myself as like in the role of a PM and say, okay, I need to convince someone to do this. So that's one example. So I would say just like, come to talk to like what has helped me the most in understanding the role is talking to people. So feel free to reach out to some UBC PMs on LinkedIn. Like there are a lot of alumni who are willing to help, as well as like join groups like our group, as well as there's so many other groups online where you can just talk to PMs because that really helps out. In addition to, just building stuff by yourself in terms of personal projects to build your portfolio, I think it's quite valuable to get some insights from actual PMs. So that was just one main takeaway that I found.
Mm-hmm. I echo that as well. In the beginning, when I was kind of like learning about PM, you could only read and I guess like find out so much online about it until you actually talk to people and listen to their stories. So yeah, I guess I'll keep the spotlight on Ratchet as he talks about our resources.
Awesome. Well, yeah, a lot of you asked about, how do I prepare for interviews? And I know Karen touched on this a little bit in our room. She said cracking the PM interview is your Bible. So personally, like our team and like I have also personally gone through the PM interview process at Microsoft, got the offer as well. So I learned a lot through my interview prep process, and I think we all got together and decided that maybe it's good to, because there are a lot of resources online, right? And it's quite hard to navigate that. So maybe it's good to, give you guys a nice little summary of what helped us the most personally. So I wanted to kind of introduce you guys to that. We have this on our Slack channel. So the first thing, I will actually share my screen to give you guys a quick demo kind of thing on how do we make the most of this. So let me just do that. Figure out, yep, here it is.
And everything is in the Slack channel. The link is, I just threw the link down in the chat if you want to join that, if you're not a part of it already.
Yes. So yeah, once you are in the Slack channel, we have this interview prep channel that we have created for you. And the idea behind this is to be a space for you to, first of all, access our compiled list of resources, as well as practice interviewing with each other. So one thing that really helped me in my process was practicing mock interviews with other PMs and other aspiring PMs. And I think that that's really helpful, and we can leverage the power of the community that we have here to practice these interviews. So the first thing we kind of did was we have this resource guide. Apologies for the number of tabs I have open, but that's just university life for you. So we put together like a nice Notion document that gives you an idea of like what kind of resources to expect, what kind of questions to expect in a PM interview. So you've got like different types of questions listed here, and like maybe a sample question for each of them. And then we give you like also a nice compiled list of resources. So one thing that really helped me was watching like YouTube videos of mock interviews, and there are some great channels out there which we have kind of linked here that have helped us personally. So yeah, this is like a quick overview of like some things you can use to prepare if you're like planning to recruit, or if you are in the process right now. Once you've kind of gone through that, our recommendation is to head over, and if you are actively interviewing or if you want to prepare, you should check out our interview prep channel guide, where you can like practice mock interviews with each other. So you learn all this stuff. Now, how do you apply it? By actually practicing interviews, right? And this is the best way you can get prepared in our kind of experience. So we have this channel guide, which gives you a little bit about the logistics of, you know, how to set up a mock interview with someone on Slack. So just the idea is join the Slack channel, and we have this Google Sheet that lets you put down your, lets you put down your name and a little bit about yourself, what companies are you focusing on, and also like a Calendly link. You can use any scheduling that you want. That's just to facilitate scheduling if you're comfortable with other tools. Just like basically people can come here, look at, you know, who wants to practice, and if they find someone that aligns with what they're looking for, they can just contact them via Slack or their preferred method. And then just arrange an interview. If you don't find anyone here, you can just message in the Slack to see if there are any people interested. And yeah, that's how you would kind of go about setting up a mock interview. We have a recommended agenda as well here. So everything is on these documents. Everything is linked on the Slack channel. You can just search up interview-prep on Slack to join it. And we hope this is useful for you. This is also one of the things we wanted to let you guys know that we were doing after this event. So yeah, feel free to make the most of it. And if you have any questions or you want to add anything to the resources that you have found helpful, feel free to message any of us in Slack or just email us. We're always open to suggestions. And yeah, thanks so much for listening to this. Hopefully, we hope that this is going to be helpful. So again, like, we would love to get some feedback once if you're interested to take a look at it and and kind of take a read on it. But yeah, thanks so much. I think that's about it for my little blurb.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks, Rashid. So we've just about reached the end of the event. I just want to thank all the speakers for coming out. We know that, you know, we all have very busy schedules, and we really appreciate you taking the time to discuss with us. And to all the attendees too, you know, again, same thing. It's midterm season right now, and I know everybody's super busy, but still taking out the time to attend. We really, really appreciate it. So just one quick thing before we sign off here, we're always looking for feedback. So we've added a QR code here. If you quickly scan, it should direct you to a form where you can just give us, you know, just your quick thoughts on how the event went. And if you have any other feedback about how we can improve, please, we would really appreciate any feedback from all of you. So yeah, thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Yeah. And before we end
One-
off, I just want to kind of echo. I can let Ratchet go after. I just want to echo what Ridvik said. Thanks so much for coming out. We tried something a bit different this time, and with like the breakout rooms, and we hope that was able to establish a better sense of community for you guys to get encouraged to ask the questions that you want to ask. We also have like a feedback channel on Slack as well, and with these feedback forms, I just want to emphasize that. Everyone here has the power to determine like what we do next. We really want to hear what you guys want from this club, and I'll pass it off to Ratchet to say his bit.
Oh, I just wanted to say the feedback channel, but you covered it.
Awesome. Cool. I think that's the end of our event. That wraps everything up. Yeah, thanks so much for coming out, and I hope you took away something from this event and learned a lot from our speakers, right? Thanks.